entire system of justice overall.
Michael Cohen talked about how he falsified business records. Okay, so you have a guy who has been a perjurer in the past that is now saying he falsified business records.
Speaking of Donald Trump, we have some footage from outside the courtroom and the so-called hush money Alvin Bragg trial in New York, where Republicans have devised a strategy of basically flooding the zone, going up to New York. I'm sure it's great for fundraising on their end and speaking out on behalf of their beleaguered leader. Let's roll this clip of Mike Johnson and Vivek Ramaswamy in New York yesterday. They were also accompanied by Doug Burgum, all kinds of different people. I think Byron Donald was there. Let's take a look.
Anybody here in the press?
Now, what they're about to do here is a very popular propaganda technique. I think usually used in right-wing media, but not only in right-wing media. And what this is it's kind of a version of where you bring on guests and allow the guests to say some crazy things. And then it's like, I didn't say that, it was the guest that said it. So you want to say crazy things, you don't say it, you bring on a crazy guy to say it. So in this case, they're going to allow these lunatics to put out all the right-wing talking points to defend Donald Trump. And they're not going to provide any context. They're not going to really challenge what's being said. However, in a perfect propaganda thing, they kind of mock it in a way in the beginning. So they're talking about like flooding the zone or whatever. So accurately calling out the tactic that they're utilizing, but they're not going to actually give any context. It's not going to challenge. They're not going to give pushback. I mean, Vivek right here, right away to me, seems so fake, and he's pretending to be outraged, and what he says is ridiculous. But even though a fundamental principle of Breaking Points is to have an objective media represented from right and the left, neither person really has a lot of pushback here. Why would that be? Why would someone who is a left-leaning person sit here and listen to this guy put out all these right-wing talking points and have nothing to say? Right? What's the point of it even being there? They might as well just have two conservatives.
Anybody at home, anybody in MSNBC or the media afterwards, to clearly state what exactly is the crime that Donald Trump committed.
Why would he be asking the news media to clearly state what the crime is? They should give that information, and they have given it multiple times, and he's well aware of that.
Okay, of course Michael Cohen was lying, in fact, in large part to try to protect Donald Trump and keep him out of hot water. But, it's not the question of whether a witness lied previously that will convince a jury about the strength or weakness of the case. It's whether that witness is telling the truth now and whether the witness is corroborated with things like covert audio recordings of Donald Trump and Michael Cohen conspiring to commit the crime. Check with hard evidence like, documents and reimbursement checks that Donald Trump was writing, including out of the Oval Office. Check, you take the weakness of Michael Cohen lying and you turn it into a strength, because you talk about his motive for lying, which was to help his former boss. So I am not all that concerned that if the jury follows the evidence and applies the instructions of law as Judge Merchan gives it to them, I am fairly confident they may end up convicting Donald Trump, and they may do it in a New York minute.
But he should be looking for information about what's happening with the case from the people who are doing the case, right? What's being said in court, right? What was alleged? I mean, has he looked at the paperwork? Right? This is not something that is mysterious, right? You have a trial that's going on, right? The charges are public, and the charges would be very specific about what the crime is being alleged and what they're trying to prove. Vivek must know this. Why does Breaking Points not have any of this commentary at all? They just sit there and let it play out, so they can push out these right-wing talking points to pander to a right-wing audience without taking accountability, because they're not the ones saying it. These are the people that are saying it, right?
Wait. We have not heard a good answer to that question. It has been vague until today. You heard Michael Cohen's testimony.
And just to be clear, the whole thing is about election interference, and also the way the interference was conducted was through falsifying records. So pretty much paying hush money to silence a story that might hurt his chances of winning the election, and then concealing it by pretending that it's something that it's not. So creating a shell company and then saying the money is for legal services when it's actually not for legal services. This has been very clear. This is no secret. This has been going on for a while. There's no way Vivek doesn't know this. So why is he lying about it? And why does Breaking Points not do any pushback on that? I mean, this is like watching CNN, right? Their whole thing is they're going to save us from the mainstream media, right, which is broken. How do you do that? By replicating their exact same business model. This is like where CNN has their fake alternative viewpoints, right? So they have a liberal panel, everyone's saying all the liberal talking points, and then they have the sort of token conservative. But the way they do it is they have this guy who just says the most ridiculous things, which is perfect for the liberal audience to say, like, oh, look at how crazy the right wing is. Now, the right wing definitely does a lot of crazy things. However, there are ways to validate or present a conservative viewpoint without being unhinged and ridiculous, right? They choose to have someone who is ridiculous to go on and represent the right wing rather than. And the thing is, even it's not even about rather than being right or wrong. There are situations where there's a lot of nonsense being said by the right wing, and they're trying to, like right now about the trial, right? But you can, with integrity, represent their point of view, right? You don't have to be ridiculous, right? So you could have someone who's a conservative who comes on and says, okay, it looks like Trump is guilty and everything, but I think it's suspicious that they're doing this at this time, or I think it's suspicious that many people do this kind of thing and they get away with it, right? There's talking points that you can put out there. You don't have to be ridiculous. But CNN, their thing is to have a guy that will just come on and say a bunch of nonsense, which is clearly stupid and he's clearly lying, and then it's kind of like, oh, we're showing both sides, right? The difference here is, instead of doing that, what Breaking Points is doing is they're having someone who supposedly represents the left not represent the left. he's just sitting there like nodding his head, and you're not really adding into the conversation. So it's kind of like, again, just like CNN has a fake right winger, Ryan is a fake left winger. And very interestingly, who is the audience that CNN most appeals to? A liberal audience. So what would be most profitable for them is to do that model of the, again, either you don't have the right wing representative or you have a crazy person from right wing representing. That's great for business. Now, who are a lot of the people that are attracted to Breaking Points? Now, you do have left-wing people, you do have liberal people, but you also have a good amount of right-wingers that are watching as well. And in that type of environment, what would be more profitable is to pander not to the left, but to the right, right? If you push too many strong sort of left-wing talking points or left-wing perspective, you're going to get a lot of pushback from a Breaking Points audience, right? So it would make sense for them to flip what CNN does. And again, you don't really have a left-wing representation. You just have this sort of fake thing. Now, that's not always the case, obviously. And in my view, these are the worst hosts on Breaking Points. So this is kind of why they're the worst group of people, because this is how they function. Normally, I would expect with Crystal and Saagar for Crystal to generally represent the left-wing perspective. And if the right is wrong about something, I feel like Saagar will actually be, I'm sorry if I'm messing his name up, but to generally be honest about it. He's not perfect. He's made mistakes for sure. We all make mistakes, but I would not be surprised to see him sort of calling out his own side, right? Emily, that's rare to see her calling out her side, at least not being too aggressive about it anyway. But Ryan, it's also not unusual for me to see him not really representing the left, just kind of sitting there and just like, ooh. Because you know what? If he really represents the left wing too much, he's going to get major pushback from the audience, right? Because again, I think their audience leans a little bit to the right.
After which, I would say it is less clear than ever what that crime actually was. They'll say falsifying business records. Well, let's look at, who did we learn falsified business records today? Yet, what, hour, 2 hours, felt like it would have been 7 hours, of Michael Cohen talking about how he falsified business records. Okay, so you have a guy who has been a perjurer in the past that is now saying he falsified business records. What is the crime?
This is a guy that was hired by Donald Trump who already served prison time, and he wasn't falsifying business records for himself, obviously. He was doing it for Donald Trump. So the only question would be, did he do that as a philanthropist? Like he's just a really cool, I love Donald Trump so much that I'm going to put myself out there. Or did he do it sort of, was this done for Donald Trump in terms of Donald Trump is the one who had him do it? Like who was behind it? Like if he went to prison for this, is he the only one? Like who was behind it? Was it Donald Trump or was it not Donald Trump? That's something that you have to prove in the case. But the idea that, trying to make it look like it's ridiculous to go after Donald Trump when logic would dictate that he's the one that's behind this, right? Cohen didn't need to suppress the story, right? Trump needed that. That was for the benefit of Trump. So either you're suggesting he did it as a philanthropist, or Trump is the one who ordered him to do it. So absolutely, he would be guilty, and they should be going after him, right? Right.
And that Donald Trump committed. Now, it appears to be what they might allege is some sort of bookkeeping error or whatever. The real bookkeeping that we need accounting of is Judge Merchan's own family member collecting millions of dollars as a Democratic operative, using the existence of this trial as a fundraising ploy for Democrats. This is unconscionable.
Bearing no relevance whatsoever to the case, to the facts of the case. Whoever he donated to, irrelevant.
I'm an attorney. I'm a former litigator myself. I am disgusted by what is happening here. What is being done here to our entire system of justice overall. The people are losing faith right now in this country, in our institutions. They're losing faith in our system of justice. And the reason for that is because they see it being abused as it is being done here in New York. The facts here are very important.
The reason people are losing faith is because of clowns like you and Pelosi and many others. Stop gaslighting us.
Facts are always important in a trial, or at least they're supposed to be. The president's actions in this matter were previously reviewed and no charges were filed. Why is that? Because there's no...
Why didn't you have a problem with that, right? When an elite gets away, there's no issues there, right? But what you have an issue with is that elite being held accountable. Holding the falsifying business records and hush money payments are not felonies, right? Which is why Trump is not being charged with falsifying business records or making hush money payments. What he's being charged with is a felony. And what the felony is to falsify your business records in furtherance of another crime, which is the campaign finance violations, right? So by him reporting the hush money payments as legal fees in an attempt to hide what he's doing, creating a shell company to hide that it's actually hush money payments, right? That is campaign finance violation, which is a misdemeanor, right? But if you're doing that in connection with another crime, right? That's where the issue comes in, right? Falsifying business records, one crime, right? And then also the campaign finance violations, that's another crime, right? And when you connect those two, it becomes a felony. This is not a novel thing. This is a normal thing, right? There are crimes that are misdemeanors if certain things happen, and they can be upgraded to felonies if other things happen, right? If a police officer tries to pull you over and you continue to drive for half a mile and then you pull over and cooperate, chances are you're not going to be charged with felony eluding. Now, if you speed off and, driving top speed for 2 miles after you've clearly seen the officer, that becomes a felony. So to go and say, oh, look at how they're turning something that should be just a misdemeanor. No, it's not a misdemeanor when you drive for 2 miles. The misdemeanor is something different, right? If all he did is falsify the business records, right, or make the hush money payments or any one thing, then it would be a misdemeanor. But he didn't do just one thing, and they're not charging him with doing one thing. They're charging him with doing multiple things in furtherance of a crime, essentially a conspiracy, right? That's not the official legal term, but essentially we're talking about a conspiracy. They conspired to hide the hush money payments, conspired to conceal the whole thing about him and Stormy Daniels, right? Election interference, campaign finance, and then the falsification of business records. Doing all of those things would, in New York, in no case be a misdemeanor. That is not a misdemeanor, right? You have to do those crimes in isolation for it to be a misdemeanor. There's nothing novel or special like, oh, they converted to a felony. No, because that is how the law is written, right? I want to be very, very clear on what the law states so you guys understand exactly what's happening, right? So the deflection tactic is to talk about a misdemeanor, which in New York state law is this 175.05, falsifying business records in the second degree. This is a misdemeanor, right? A person is guilty of falsifying business records in the second degree, a misdemeanor. When the intent is to defraud, they make or cause a false entry, alter, erase, or obliterate. This is not what they're saying Trump did. So why on earth would they be charging him with a misdemeanor when this is not what happened, right? What happened was a felony. They have to prove that this is what happened, but based on what happened, it would be a felony, not a misdemeanor. Notice the distinction, 175.10, felony, falsifying business records in the first degree, right? Under New York penal law, 175.10, a person is guilty of falsifying business records in the first degree, a felony, when they commit the crime of falsifying business records in the second degree, and when their intent to defraud includes an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, right? So if the falsification of business records is done with the intent to commit or conceal an additional crime, it escalates the charge from a misdemeanor to a felony. That's how the law is written. So the only argument is, in court, you could argue and defend yourself and say this is not a felony, this is a misdemeanor. And I don't think that's an argument being made, right? If this is the case, then why is it that that's not what Trump's legal team, that's not what their argument is being made? And also, if the falsifying of the business records wasn't that big of a deal, right, or the hush money payments wasn't that big of a deal, why hide it? Why create a shell company and pretend that it's legal payments unless you know that what you're doing is wrong, right? And not just wrong, I mean, something that would be a big risk to you that warrants all of the smoke and mirrors.
Now, 8 years later, suddenly they've resurrected this thing. They brought it back. And why is that? Well, just apply common sense. Everyone can see. It's painfully obvious that we're now 6 months out from an election.
One of the very obvious reasons why a lot of this stuff is happening now is because, again, Trump is an elite, right? And there's not really a lot of appetite to go after elites. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, it's not a big appetite. Because if you go after Trump, then next thing you know, they go after your people. right? There's too many there's too much dirty hands in the situation, right? So there was a lot of people afraid to go after Donald Trump, but once one went after him, that was kind of and the thing about it, this is not surprising. This was already predicted, right? This was predicted. This was already discussed, that it was a matter of having a first person do it. No one wanted to be the first person to go after a former president, regardless of guilt or not guilty or whatever. No one wanted to do that, right? And even as they're doing it, they're very like walking on eggshells. You know, they give him gag orders, he ignores it, and it's kind of like slap on the wrist, you know. So no one wanted to do it, but once one person did it, then everybody else that was kind of like afraid now, like, okay, I guess we can do it now, and that was just kind of a domino effect.
Yeah. And that's the reason. That is the reason why they brought these charges here and across the country.
Feels like a dream, feels like magic.
These charges here and across the country.
So there's just a lot of fatigue and exhaustion with Alvin Bragg's decision here, even on the left, Ryan. I think it's interesting, you know, Tommy Tuberville, J.D. Vance, I think Rick Scott went last week. Yeah, he did go up last week to sort of go up to New York, have these moments.
So the Breaking Point's response to all of this nonsensical whitewashing and deflection and fake outrage is there's a lot of fatigue with Alvin Bragg's decision, even on the left. Okay.
Like we just saw with Mike Johnson and Vivek Ramaswamy, sort of relish the spotlight, look like they're, you know, really, they have Donald Trump's back. From my perspective, you know, we just did a whole segment on the economy. I find it very interesting that people are sort of patting Mike Johnson, who continues to be a real person, we can confirm, on the back for this, when it's like the dude just flip-flopped on FISA, and he's doing this to...
So this is very good. You know, here she's kind of giving some pushback on Mike Johnson. So it's like, if you think that she's totally a partisan and she's just like right-winger, blah, 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 you're wrong, because here she's saying something negative about him. But she's not really, she didn't challenge any of the nonsense that he just did. Any of the nonsense that he just said, no pushback whatsoever. And if you honestly believe that a bunch of corrupt politicians just went up there and said a bunch of stuff and there's nothing to push back on, I mean, I got a bridge to sell you. Right? But she's got no issue with nothing he just said. Her issue is something completely unrelated. So it's kind of like, oh, no, I'm objective. I call out Mike Johnson when it's appropriate, right? But in this matter, and that's what I'm saying. Like, by doing that, she's further validating all that they said. They said all this crazy stuff, no pushback, and then she actually does have a pushback, but on something else, which really sends a message that it's validating all the stuff Vivek, you know. And then they're also they mock them like, oh, trying to, you know, look good for Donald Trump and that kind of thing. So it's really, really, this is kind of Tucker Carlson level, like propaganda techniques. So it's pretty good from propaganda, but not from a program that says, oh, we're going to save you from the broken mainstream media. Like, no, this is not it.
Like, make you feel like he's MAGA. You know, like, this is, again, like, the case is ridiculous, but Mike Johnson is going up here, other Republicans are going up here. They might not actually, like, vote the way that you...
I mean, it almost sounds like she's pro-MAGA here, in a way, because she's saying that he's trying to make you feel like he's MAGA, but he's not really MAGA. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Emily?
Want them to, but they're going to do that and act like they're super MAGA because this is a really easy opportunity. I mean, even liberals in the New York Times are inveighing against Alvin Bragg at this point, saying, you know, at first there was an op-ed a couple weeks ago that was like, this is a grave mistake because he had to upgrade because of the statute of limitations. He had to basically devise the strategy to say this wasn't a misdemeanor, it was actually a felony because it was about breaking federal campaign finance laws, which is really unclear because of Donald Trump.
So this is a big talking point, and if Ryan was really sort of objective journalists and worthy of the Breaking Point's brand and what they're supposed to represent, he would push back on that. What she is describing is standard legal practice, right?
About breaking federal campaign finance laws, which is really unclear because if Donald Trump had classified the hush money payments to a porn star as something else, you know, it also doesn't really make sense from a legal standpoint that that's their argument. And even to say that it was done to break federal campaign finance laws, he has to prove that it was only about the campaign. There were no personal reasons for hushing up somebody who was alleging that they had an affair with you while your wife was pregnant. So it's just a circus.
Right, because it's this interesting situation where...
So his response to all of that is right. So everything she said would be exactly what I would want to say if I'd want to do a sort of highbrow pandering to a right-wing audience, right? Because the right-wing audience doesn't want to hear that Trump is guilty, doesn't want to hear this is a valid trial, that's not going to go over well. They want to hear that it's a circus and it's nonsense and who knows what he did and he didn't really do anything, and it's just, you know, they want to hear that. So she just so happens to say the kind of things that would go well with that type of audience. And then he responds with, yep. So what is his purpose being on the show, right? If the idea is to have a right-wing representative and left-wing representative, how can she just say all these talking points that, again, would be exactly what you want to say if you want to pander to the right, and he has no issue with that. He doesn't have any issue with these right-wing, corrupt politicians who got up on stage and said a bunch of nonsense. No pushback on that. No pushback on Emily basically virtue signaling to all the right-wing audience, right? So again, imagine that Ryan wasn't there. If it was just her, what would be the difference? Right? What are we learning from a left-wing perspective of having him there? Like how are we benefiting from having him there? Right? She's serving a purpose. For the right-wing viewers, they enjoy hearing what she just said. They probably feel like that's great journalism, right? So she's serving a value. What is Ryan's value? Right? He's not challenging what she's saying. He's not adding an alternative viewpoint. He's just, yep.
Nobody seems to doubt that he did what he did, like, from beginning to end.
Notice the propaganda technique. Nobody's doubting that he did what he did. What exactly did he do, Ryan? And why won't you actually say what he did? This is like a Sarah Sanders where she talks about January 6th and she says some goofballs or something. Some goofballs did some crazy things, right? What goofballs? And what are the crazy things? She won't even illustrate in any level of detail the bad things that happened on January 6th, right? He won't even say out of his mouth. So not only no pushback, but he won't even say what Trump actually did. And he will just passively like, oh, we all know what he did. I think everybody agrees that he did what he did. Wait. I mean, it almost sounds like he's saying that Trump is guilty and Trump actually did commit these crimes. And we all know it. But without actually saying those words, he allows you to hear what you want to hear. Right? So to the right-wing audience, he's not saying Trump is guilty. But to a left-leaning person, they'll hear him saying Trump is guilty. Right? Oh, so Ryan's actually kind of being objective. Right? But then look at what he says immediately after that. Right? Immediately after that, what does he say?
Question is, well, is this a crime? And later in this program, because it's this interesting situation where nobody seems to doubt that he did what he did, like, from beginning to end. Question is, well, is this a crime? And later in this...
Perfect. So first, you kind of sort of suggest he's guilty, and then immediately after that, you put doubt. You know, like, but is this a crime? Like that sounds like something that I would hear from Fox News, right? That sounds like something Fox News, rather than challenge the substance of the case, just say, well, what is it? It's not even a crime. I guess it's just hush money thing. Oh, who cares about that? Some porn star thing. This is silly, right?
Program, we're going to talk about how AIPAC is spending millions of dollars secretly in a congressional race in order to influence it, using shell packs in order to get around kind of disclosure requirements. Nobody's remotely suggesting they're going to be prosecuted for any of that. Nobody gets prosecuted for anything when it comes to campaign.
Oh, so this kind of corruption is a thing and it happens, but it normally doesn't get prosecuted. So therefore, it's kind of ridiculous to actually prosecute it. That's the argument he's making? So he doesn't really want to talk about the corruption that Donald Trump has done, but he does want to talk about corruption that other people have done and how they get away with it. Right? But he's not supportive of when they are actually prosecuting it. Right? Now, don't get me wrong. If Ryan was a good journalist and an honest journalist and not a propagandist, he would point out these multiple things, right? He would acknowledge the Trump crimes, acknowledge that it looks like he's really guilty. He would challenge the idea that this is a circus and this is ridiculous and say, no, this is actually valid. And I wish more people would be getting charged because, you know, this should not be this should not be a thing. People doing this and getting away with it, right? He would say that, but then he would also say, but I find it kind of annoying that, you know, it's not consistent. Like, absolutely, Trump looks like he's guilty, and if he's guilty, he should suffer the penalty. But I think these other people should as well. But no, he doesn't want to talk about how Trump is guilty. He hides away from that. I know it's a circus, whatever. But he will talk about other people and other situations, how it's bad that they get away, right? It's bad that they get away, but he's not so concerned about Trump being actually charged. Like, that's not something that's like, great, this is good. Like, which one is it? Do you have a problem with people doing this stuff and getting away with it, or do you not? Because if you have a problem with it, then you should be happy that they're going after Trump.
In finance law, the idea that this would be the one thing that would get prosecuted, I think, is the reason that a lot of his supporters like, really, come on,
Yeah.
like, it's like, you know, hush money is legal.
Notice what he's doing there. And I'm not saying this in itself is bad, but he's basically validating the point of view of the quote-unquote other side. Like, he's supposed to be a left-wing representative. Now, not saying this in itself is wrong. Like, it's good to understand your political opponents, right? And it's good to sort of steel man their arguments. But he's not really making any counter-arguments, right? All he's doing is saying, yep, and like, oh, I get it. Trump supporters, I get, this is why I did. You're validating everything that they're saying, right? You're letting the Republicans say a bunch of crazy stuff, not pushing it back. You're letting Emily say a bunch of stuff, like just deflecting and whatever, no pushback. And now you're going even further by saying, yeah, Trump supporters, I get it. Right.
Right.
And
Right, it is.
okay, so and then you're saying, okay, well, do we expect Donald Trump is like going over the paperwork that's filed on his behalf, either to the FEC or to the guy? And what good would that even do? Can you imagine Donald Trump like going over paperwork with a fine-tooth comb?
Now, this is where things are getting even worse. We literally have, as part of the proceedings, a secret recording which demonstrates Donald Trump's direct involvement and awareness of the payments. His awareness and involvement in payments is also a critical part of the case in general. So witnesses have testified to that effect. So either Ryan hasn't been paying attention to the case at all, or he's intentionally being dishonest here, right? Because he's trying to make an argument of like, Donald Trump probably doesn't pay attention to this stuff, when in the case they've specifically addressed this point. It's specifically not only the audio recording, but the witness testimony has been presented to specifically address that allegation of whether Trump is aware or not. So why would Ryan not be aware of this? Why is Ryan saying exactly what I would want to say if I were a left-winger on this show and I wanted to pander to the right-wing audience? Right? He's doing a really, really good job. Like, if I wanted to be a fake left-winger on this show, I would do a version of what he's doing right now. Right? Almost everything he's doing is all sort of a nod to the right wing. Obviously, she's nodding to them. She's supposed to represent the right, so she's doing her job. What job is Ryan doing here? What is his purpose being on this show? Right. This is Baby Channel. Debate me in the comment section below. Click on the like button. Subscribe to my side bell. Be well.